Mental health is a serious issue that is becoming more prevalent and acknowledged in society today. Approximately 20% of the general population will personally experience some type of mental illness in their lifetime. Unfortunately, individuals who suffer from mental illnesses are at an increased risk of imprisonment and being involved in the criminal justice system. Individuals with mental illnesses are extremely overrepresented in Canadian prisons. In fact, there are 3 times the amount of individuals with mental illnesses in prison than in the general population. This epidemic is being labeled as the criminalization of mental illness, as those suffering from mental illnesses are not receiving the proper care they need and are instead becoming predisposed to troubles with the law. Without the access to supports and services, people with mental illnesses may be more vulnerable to commit more crimes or behave in ways that attract attention that inevitably lead to prison time, where they once again are refused the proper care and treatment they need. This creates an ever-long cycle that many people with mental illnesses find difficult to break. It is therefore imperative that the criminalization of people who have a mental illness is addressed so that individuals can receive access to the support, care, and treatment that they need and are entitled to. Stigma or discrimination attached to mental illnesses presents a serious barrier, not only to the diagnosis and treatment, but also for acceptance in the community. Many individuals suffering from mental illnesses do not acquire or have access to the support they need. This is extremely problematic, as without access to supports and services, some people with mental illnesses may commit crimes or behave in ways that draw police attention. Police officers have been described as the informal first responders of our mental health systems, as 5% of dispatch calls involve what police call emotionally disturbed persons. This is enormously problematic because many police officers lack the specific training to recognize the signs and behaviors related to mental illnesses and how to respond to someone who is acutely ill. Instead of assigning these individuals and providing them with the proper support they need, they are often put in jail. Approximately 40% of people with mental illnesses have been arrested at least once in their lifetime. Between 1997 and 2010, symptoms of serious mental illness reported by federal admission increased by 61% for males and 71% for females. Provincial and federal prisons can be particularly difficult and challenging places for all people, especially those suffering from a mental illness. All inmates have a fundamental right to health care, including mental care. However, these services are often deemed inadequate due to high demands and insufficient resources. Offenders with mental illnesses are extremely vulnerable in prison. These individuals often report feeling unsafe and frequently the victims of intimidation and violence by other offenders and correctional staff. Inmates with mental illnesses do not manage well in prison, demonstrated through disruptive behavior, aggression, violence, withdrawal, and refusal or inability to follow rules. Self-harm is a big problem with those who have mental illnesses in prison. Due to a lack of understanding and misinterpretation of the symptoms and behaviors associated with mental illnesses, correctional officers often respond with security measures instead of with the appropriate crisis response and mental health treatment. Common intervention to manage self-injury in prison include physical handling, restraints, pepper spray, and segregation. Segregation is overused in prison and jails to address behaviors related to mental illness. Prolonged segregation can actually cause symptoms of mental illnesses in those who do not have one and cause irreversible psychological and physiological harm. It is considered an inappropriate response to dealing with offenders in general, but specifically those with mental illnesses. Upon the discharge of incarceration, individuals with mental health are often not directed to the resources available to them in society, and eventually end in a circular pattern of being rearrested and reincarcerated. Individuals with mental health being overrepresented in the criminal justice system is a serious issue for a number of reasons. Number 1. The overpopulation and overcrowding of prisons. Number 2. Instead of rehabilitating individuals with mental health, we are putting them at an increased risk of committing more crimes as we are not giving them the proper care and treatment they need. Number 3. The justice system could be better using their time and resources for more serious crimes and problems. I am trying to put forward the notion that there are problems in multiple levels of the Canadian justice system that have to be solved in order to reduce the increase of mentally ill individuals in prison. In order to do so, solutions must be implemented at each level as well. The following solutions offer details of not only how prisons can help individuals receive the help they need, but describe ways to keep them out of prison entirely. Although in recent years, the general public has received much more education and acknowledgement on mental health, it is not nearly enough. There is still a great stigmatization attached to mental illnesses, and this prevents many individuals from seeking the support they need, which perhaps leads to an increase of troubling behavior. Implementation and comprehensive mental health strategies and programs should be a concern for all levels of government. Programs and support groups are needed for these individuals to have proper access to the help they need. Police and correctional officer training should include mandatory informational training on how to deal with individuals who have mental illnesses instead of directly placing them in prisons. It is important for police and correctional officers to understand mental illnesses to ensure they stay out of prison or to ensure their successful rehabilitation back into society. It is a fundamental human right for all individuals, including inmates, to have access to mental health care. However, the mental health care inside prisons are often insufficient in dealing with the high number and diversity of mental health cases within the prisons. It is therefore imperative to create an improved mental health system inside prisons to help reduce the rate of reoffending. Although screening tests are done within admission to prison, those who are diagnosed with a mental illness who commit minor crimes should receive treatment and rehabilitation for their crime rather than jail time, as this tends to self-incriminate individuals with a mental illness and make them more at risk for committing more crimes in the future. All of these solutions will aid in the overpopulation of individuals in prison, as 26% of offenders are being double bunked in Ontario prisons in the 2012-2013 year. Thank you for joining us this week in discussing the criminalization of mental illnesses on Let's Talk. Next week, we'll be discussing the increase of mental illnesses in children. I'm your host, Lindsay Lubberdink. Thank you and good night.